Jamie.
Okay, great. It is 7 o'clock, so let's go ahead and call our meeting to order. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great.
Hasn't gotten any better.
A little bit, just a little bit. All right, we're going to move into citizen. Do we have any tonight?
I did not receive anything.
Okay. So then, Kate, if we could please do a roll call.
Jamie Allen,
Here.
Melissa Narrett,
Here.
Chris Perkins,
Here.
Keith Ravenberg,
Here.
Lindsay Spencer,
Here.
Carrie Trossel, Mark Womer.
Here.
All right, and if I can please get a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes, and we'll move into the superintendent's report.
Good evening. So first thing we have up tonight is Sam Rayburn with a communications update for the team.
Sam, are you gonna post the results of this or summarize it and get it out in a communication to the community? And second to that, I didn't see it. We'll get access to that as well. So, Dr. Lane, for you, I apologize for the dogs. What about, so it's interesting to me, the staff and faculty, right? And that 50% or so. So have you guys had conversations in terms of what does that look like? You know, how do there's going to be some level of uncomfortableness, right? I get on the student side, this notion of opting out, right, and doing virtual. What does it look like for staff and teachers, et cetera?
Well, I think there's a couple factors that can influence that one pretty dramatically. I mean, more than anything else, I think it's education. We're asking the staff. This was intentionally kind of a cold survey, if you will, that was really just a pre-survey. And how do you feel about coming back right now, knowing nothing of what the multiple precautions and procedures are we put into place? And of course, they're thinking about how do we move students around a room, and how do we do those hundreds of things that we do in a day. So I think part of it is going to be, really taking them through the plan. And also on Monday, we have, as part of it, we've had an ongoing reentry task force, but we're also meeting. We got two separate meetings on Monday, one with the elementary, includes several elementary staff. Then we have another meeting with middle school and high school staff. So we're going to take them through our preliminary plans and also get all their feedback, questions, and concerns. And then we can really gear our ongoing communication around those. So back to Sam's point, I am confident when they hear the level of detail and work that we put into this planning, that they'll feel much more comfortable about coming back to work. Sam, anything else that you had for the board?
Thanks, Sam.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. Next up, we have Dave Gill to give us an update on our project additions and renovations. Dave, I think you're frozen. I'll ask Dave to log off and log back on here. there he goes. Let's see if he comes back in. Well, Lindsay, if he doesn't pop in here in a second, did you want to move into the budget discussion and then we could go back to,
Yeah, I think that works for me.
he's still not in here. Let's see. All right, should we do that now, Lindsay?
Yes.
All right, so let's go to Steve Chota. Steve has the budget for us this evening.
Right. The budget being presented to you tonight for the fiscal year 2021 is essentially the same budget that was presented to you earlier this month, with the addition of about $140,000 in expenditures. And those are mostly related to COVID-19. We added about 60,000 in COVID-related supplies, and we also added additional funding for substitutes just in case we need more substitutes as a result of the COVID-19. At this time, I'm open to any questions the board may have. All right, and I'd ask the board to then, if there's no further questions, to approve the 2021 budget.
I move that we approve the 2021 budget as detailed.
Second.
All right, discussion.
So we had talked about, so Steve, I had sent you a note and I appreciate it. It was helpful around the phase pieces. I thought, had we talked about approving including additional monies for devices for the earlier age kids or no?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Those are actually, those are included in the budget, but the way it worked out is we're actually adding a lot of smart boards, obviously, to the middle school, high school project. We actually got a better cost than anticipated on those by a couple $1,000s a smart board. So long story short, we were able to fund so that includes, this budget includes money for kindergarten and first grade to all go 1-to-1 on their iPads. So we will be fully 1-to-1 K through 12 going into this school year.
So that's good. Do we know, I know there was challenges with backlogs, et cetera. Have we actually ordered those? Are we able to get our hands on them?
Yeah, they're showing that we'll have them before the start of the school year.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for the budget at this point? All right, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the budget is approved.
All right, Steve, just keep on going here. You got meal prices.
All right. The paid lunch equity calculator was used to determine the meal prices for next year. And that calculator indicated a 10-cent increase in lunch prices. So that's presented to you. In addition, because of continued deficit spending in food service, we're also proposing a 5-cent increase in the breakfast costs and no change to the milk costs.
Steve, I noticed on the memo that the prices for breakfast are the same from 1920 to 2021. Should that be $2 to 205 or 205 to 210?
205 to 210. The one I'm looking at says 210. I apologize if you got a different one.
Yes.
It looks like the one that we have is at 205.
Okay,
Yeah.
it should be 210 for elementary and secondary and 250 for adult for breakfast.
All right, can we get a motion to, oh, sorry. A motion to approve the meal prices for 2020, 21?
So I move that we approve the meal prices as described to us, not as actually presented to us. They are slightly different here.
Second.
And any more discussion? Any other questions?
Does he just, so I understand we're deficit spending, but what does this actually do? That increase to the deficit spend, does that put us even, or we're just trying to?
We're trying to, you're right, minimize the deficit.
Okay.
So what were we last year, like, so like we lost $30,000 or something on meals, and is that?
Well, I actually looked at it for this year. Revenue is running about $250,000. Expenditures are a little over 300,000. And expenditures are higher if we buy any food-related equipment as well.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of factors. COVID certainly impacted that. Our meal rates, which helps with that, were actually up for the year going into COVID. So, at that point we were projected to, probably have somewhere in that typical $25,000 to $30,000 in the red. Ended up being a little higher. We did have some equipment that we purchased, and combine that with obviously, a lot less meals being served. So.
Okay, any other questions about the meal prices? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the meal prices are set for the 2020-21 school year.
Thank you. At this time, I'd also ask the board to approve a resolution for the July bill payments. There's, I guess, a good likelihood that we will not have a board meeting in July. Should that happen, we would need the board to approve those expenditures. And so that's what we're asking at this time.
Okay, can we get a motion to approve a resolution for the July bill payments?
I move that we approve a resolution for approving July bill payments.
Second.
Discussion?
Is there anything unusual we're expecting, or no? Or do we know?
Unusual, not that I'm aware of.
Noteworthy.
We do have the large furniture purchase that's coming in.
So that'll be paid in July.
That it will be. Oh, excuse me. No, the larger portion will be paid in June. We do have a smaller bill coming in later than that.
Because I saw there was a large one, right, in this fiscal year, the June, and
Right.
then, all right. So
Yes.
That's covered. We have another one though, smaller one that goes out in July.
July or August.
Okay.
Yeah, much smaller though.
Okay.
Okay, anything else for that resolution? Right. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the resolution for July bill payments.
All right, moving on to tuition rates for next year. Again, there's a calculator. We plugged the numbers in. I think the calculator was provided to you. And that indicated increases in tuition rates for next year, as indicated in the memo. So the elementary rate for 2021 will be $20,060.81. Secondary, $21,847.71, and district-wide, $20,988.48. I'd ask the board to approve.
All right.
I move that we approve the fiscal year 2020-2021 tuition rates as outlined.
Second.
So I just had a question, just looking at the increase for those. It looks like elementary went up about 10% and secondary went up about 3%. Is there any reason that those are dramatically quite a bit different, or is that?
Honestly, I dropped the numbers in the calculator and
That's
We can take a deeper look at that, Lindsay. My initial thought of looking at those numbers is we're down a few students from previous year's enrollment. So with our size, that can that impacts it more than our spending. So, but
Yeah, Lindsay, I looked. The drivers count, student counts, just the denominator.
okay, great, thanks. Okay.
Is that because of a low number for incoming kindergarten, or just low across?
it was we had a pretty good sized graduating class last year. Now the kindergarten class was a good size. Actually, our last few kindergarten classes have been good size, but we just had some. We also had kind of a couple decent sized bubbles of seniors leave us. Obviously, we lose a few big kids every year, so it's not large, but you start talking 5 kids, 10 kids. So
Not an insignificant number.
correct.
All right. Any other discussion for the tuition rate? Okay. So all in favor to approve the tuition rates for 2020-21, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the tuition rates are set.
thank you. And now before the board is a resolution for the lease payment. Last year at this time, the resolution included 2 leases, but one of those was paid off this year. We have 1 remaining, which will be completed in 2022. So this year we will have payments of just under $3,000, which is due September 1st, and another payment of $158,000, which is due March 1st of next year.
All right. Can we get a motion to approve the resolution for the building lease?
I move that we approve the renewal of the lease for fiscal year 2020-2021.
Second.
Discussion? All right. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so
Thank you.
the renewal passes.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Next up, I'm looking for approval for our physicians service agreement. This is no cost to the district, and where Dr. John Madden agrees to serve as a liaison to our nurses and is there for the district in a consultative role and resource for us.
I move that we approve the physician and service agreement for fiscal year 2020-2021.
Second.
Discussion? Do we always have we had this same physician for a while now, or?
Since I've been here.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, any other questions? All in favor for the physician service agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is approved.
All right, thank you. Next up, on a yearly basis, we set our rates for renting various district facilities. So we have attached our current rates. You know, this year is going to be, at least the start of it's going to be a little different in that I don't anticipate that we would be renting any district facilities for an indeterminate amount of time. We'll obviously, you know, we can have that discussion and the board can have that discussion as COVID progresses and develops to see where that ultimately that would be to have you know, any kind of larger groups coming into the district. So at this point, my recommendation would be that we keep rates the same. Our focus has generally been on you know, trying to make those as affordable as possible, since it is a community resource, and we typically only rent these out to community members and community groups.
Okay.
I move that we approve the facility rental rates for fiscal year 2020, 2021.
Second.
Discussion?
So do we, I guess, Brian, once we, I mean, this is a starting point, but I mean, the hope, right, we have the commons area and all that. Is that, as I'm looking through this, where would that fall?
Yeah, there might be a good opportunity for us as the project is completing to see if there to be a couple of those spaces. That's a great point. Let me make a note of that. And before we rent those out, we could bring a revised version of that to the board. Because there are a couple nice spaces in the project, the new lecture hall. We have we're going to have a beautiful room next to the library, and then of course the common itself. So yeah, we might want to, I think you'd probably stretch it and say, you know, you could use some of those broad terms, but I think it'd be better that if we get a little more specific on it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think if we just were more specific, because I mean, based on what we outlined, there are some cool spaces that we should just have outlined if we want to offer them up.
Absolutely, which we do. That was part of the thought process, is we would make it very accessible to the community. So I'm looking forward to when we can do that. So.
To go along with that too, and just because I don't know how the flow works, is if somebody's renting the gym, is there a way that they can get in and out without using the commons? So if they're separate groups, if one's in the commons and one is in the gym, be thinking about like how that's going to work.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it does. Luckily, with the new buildings, we do have a lot better ability to lock down areas of where someone isn't just able to go into one part of the building and freely walk all the way to the other side. So that's a great point. I'm at that.
Are we going to continue to not rent out the small gym?
Well, it's kind of going to be I don't think at the start of the school year we're going to be prepared to do that. I think we would ultimately, I would like to reach out at some point. I'll also reach out to music this summer, our district insurance, because I think I would like to hear more about potential liability. You know, what does that look like if you allow someone to come in and play volleyball or those kind of things? You know, I don't know what our liability is as a district to these outside groups, even though we of course have some hold harmless waivers and things of that nature. But I'd like to learn a little bit more about that and share that with the board.
Okay, any other questions about the rental facility rates? All right, so, all in favor to accept the facility rental rates for the 2020-21 school year, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that is approved for next year.
Okay, next up, thank you. Next up, we have the MOU, which historically I sign off on, but historically we've also asked for board approval of the MOU. That's with our SRO. And so what we've attached for review is the version from 2019-2020. And we wanted to see if the board is comfortable with the language in that. And then ultimately we would ask the city to send us ask Major McIntyre to send us a new version of this that would obviously update the years or anything else that we have as part of this request. Once again, our school resource officer, this is also at our request, will continue to be Iman Figs. We've been very happy with Iman's performance and his work with kids in the district.
Right, can we get a motion to approve the MOU for our school resource officer?
I move that we approve the memo of understanding for the SRO for fiscal year 2020, 2021.
Second.
Discussion?
So Brian, the only thing around the language is like this year, right? Honestly, we didn't have a need for him, right? Once we hit the COVID piece. And I think what I heard and saw was that he was picking up just beat responsibilities. So what did that look like in terms of the contract and our arrangement with them?
Well, it's still an ongoing discussion. So yes, we might. I thought about that as well, Jamie. Do we want to, put any kind of language in there that the 75% would be based on time that we're able to frankly be open as a school district?
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I would recommend. I'd like to put something in there, right? It's not, that way it's, right, look, hopefully we don't have that again, but I can see, right, there's room for making an argument on either side.
Well, if the board is all comfortable with that, I can work up that language and I'll share it with the police department, and then ultimately the board can see the final MOU before I sign off on it. If that's acceptable.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Do we know if Officer Figs is available to be the SRO for our district next school year?
Yes, he is. Yeah, he's done an excellent job.
So Brian, what's just a broader statement? I mean, he's fantastic, really, really good. But just the concept of the SRO, given the environment we're in now, have you had conversations with colleagues around where everyone's head is related to this? Things are changing. I'm curious if you've picked other people's brains.
Yeah, it was actually a topic for our one of our topics for our superintendent Zoom meeting that we had recently with all the county superintendents. And one of the superintendents had inquired if anyone had any parents calling and so forth. She had a couple inquiring. Everyone else replied that actually they knew, of course, about the national conversation around SROs in schools. But the point that she made and the point that everyone else was making on that call is just that they actually had great relationships with their local police department, and that their SROs were similar to Officer Figs is really really beloved by the students and does not serve in any form of a disciplinary role, has never arrested one of our students and is there in much more of a supportive, social, emotional, social worker type role and providing a great relationship with the police. So that was across the board. So no one on that phone call, which there were probably 45 superintendents on that call, said that they were considering not bringing back SROs.
Any other questions or comments about the MOU for our SRO? Right, seeing none, all in favor to accept the MOU for our SRO, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that is approved for next school year.
Thank you. And next up, we have our school crossing guards, which are supplied by the city, and we reimburse for them. So once again, we have the 1920 agreement, and we would typically every year we take a look at the times, make sure that that's going to work for our calendar, and obviously then we sign the MOU and return it to the city once they provide it to us.
All right, can we get a motion to approve the school crossing guard agreement?
I move that we approve the school crossing guard agreement for fiscal year 2020, 2021.
Second.
Discussion? There's also a crossing guard, right at McGrath Elementary. Is that, who pays for that? Is that our school district, someone that's hired through the school district, or?
Now that's also one of these guards.
It is, okay, it's for both of those locations. Okay. All right, any other questions or discussion around crossing guards? Right, seeing none, all in favor for accepting the school crossing guard agreement, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that is approved for next school year.
All right, next up, Lindsay, I think you wanted to start a discussion on the MSBA virtual.
I just want to take a couple of minutes. I know Keith and Jamie and Brian and I attended the virtual conference on Friday, and I thought we could just share a couple comments or thoughts that we had about that. I thought it was great. I think MSBA did a nice job pulling together a lot of different speakers and areas of interest. To give the rest of the board kind of an idea, they started the general session and a pediatrician, part of Missouri's Association of Pediatricians, spoke, and there's also a physician who I believe is also studies infectious disease, and I just, it was very nice to hear from some medical professionals around COVID and the concerns that they have and the education that they are kind of relying on school districts because we have so much access to families and providing information to them. The pediatrician was encouraging school districts to remind parents that going in for their well child visits is important right now. Vaccinations, staying up on vaccinations, encouraging flu shots in the fall, just ways that we can help keep our community healthy along with COVID. And the doctor also just kind of went over how COVID is spread, that social distancing is our primary way of keeping people safe, masks are secondary, and that this is kind of our reality right now we're not sure how long, but it's also very, very important to get kids back into school. That is also a very safe place for them, and they need to be learning and part of that environment. So it was a very good conversation to listen to. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add on that general session, or I guess I can continue to go over a couple highlights, and then if folks want to chime in. But we just need to be clear about, I went to, the next one was on the board's role during this process and just getting clear information out to the community and helping support our district and administrators and our communication staff and being front and center, talking to our community with clear messages. And we don't have all of the answers, but still out there, we're here and we're working on it. There's a discussion around equity that was fantastic in different districts, what they're working on, and trying to keep or to provide opportunities for our families and staff to be involved in those conversations. There's a large swath of information that was shared that day.
Yeah, I think a couple things I took away. One, there's definitely some materials that I'll even send a note out that are worthwhile looking at, just some PowerPoints, easy to digest. That quite honestly, Brian, I think we should have Sam put out to the community because they're really good. I mean, one of the clear messages was, we do not have all the answers. We don't know that. We won't. This thing evolves as we go. But it was loud and clear to a person. We've got to get kids back in school. And so it was interesting. I think every person that we talked to from different perspectives was coming at it with, it's going to be different, but we've got to get them back into school for a variety of reasons. The other thing I took away is, man, we are so fortunate. Our district, with the resources we have, the number of kids, and our ability to be flexible here. I mean, some of the conversations were, just the fact that transportation, right, is such a small part of our overall delivery model. Holy cow, that is such a big deal. So, I think us as a board need to be pushing, Brian and team to really take advantage of our size and our quote unquote flexibility to really showcase, that we can deliver in times like this. The other thing is the equity piece was just really good. And I think we as a board, when we go into our retreat, should spend some time really focus around it. I mean, there's some really good opportunities. Just Webster, the individual who sits on the school board there, really good. I know Carrie Trossel's spoken about, what happens when Vic goes away, what does that look like, and all of those pieces. I think we as a board really need to talk about that and look at how we can really respond to that. I think we as elected officials have a big responsibility to put that front and center and figure out what we can do to be part of the solution, right? And not just on the sideline. So that was a pretty good message. Those are my takeaways.
Mm-hmm. There's another conversation about the homework gap, and we live in an urban area, obviously, where most people have access to the internet, but they were just a big conversation about the digital divide between different communities, and it happens here too, more so in rural Missouri, but just that is also part of the equity conversation. They were saying one example that they encourage districts to do is when students are enrolling in your district, you ask very specific questions like, do you have broadband at home? Do you have a device that you can use? Of course, now we are able to give devices one-to-one to our students, which is fantastic, but just things that I hadn't thought very much about until we went to online curriculum, and just being very proactive about making sure that all of our students have access to any kind of curriculum that we need to provide to them outside of the walls of our schools. So it was a good reminder. Like Jamie said too, I'm happy to have conversations with anyone about the things that I heard and the discussions that were happening throughout this conference. It was very relevant, and I thought well done.
It was also good discussion around providing special education services in a virtual setting and the challenges that come with that. So that's, to Lindsay's point, yet another example of the population that this hits the hardest are often the students that are struggling. So, and also to Jamie's point, once again shows just how important it is, even though of course we have some concerns about COVID, how important it is that we get these students back into school, because it's those students that that struggle, that more than anything, or don't have the two-parent households at home, and many other things that aren't supporting them, that we desperately need back in our schools.
Can I throw in a few things?
Please.
I listened to the legislative session update. I don't know if the others did. I guess one thing, there's some bill passed. The point of it was to shorten the amount of time that you have to sign up for the school board from like 5 weeks to 3 weeks, and except for in Kansas City, it's only between Christmas and New Year's or something like that. They didn't offer any explanation as to what was the justification for that, but it just seems, it's just one of these things they do. It hasn't been signed by the governor, so you may get some urgings from MSBA to urge the governor to veto it, because it just seems, it seems goofy. Anyway, so that's one thing. I guess the other thing about the legislative session, I think the COVID situation cut it short. So, like all good government, given less opportunity to mess things up, they've passed fewer laws this year. So the COVID probably benefited us that way. But there was me being cynical again about, but there were the movements to bring in different sorts of school choice things are continuing, and they're not going to stop. I think some of them got cut short by the shortened legislative session, but they're coming along. And the interesting twist there in my mind is at the delegate assembly, there was, as I'd mentioned, contested elections, which is very unusual. And I can't remember. I think the one person that was running for vice president, and I voted for him, so of course he lost. But a point that he'd made in a little speech was, this stuff is out there about school choice, and we, school boards and school boards generally should be trying to stay ahead of that and create, and we should be the architects of these sorts of processes as opposed to this somebody else. He made that point. Maybe I'm the only one who found that to be a good thing, because he lost that. I voted for anybody who lost. So, but I've said that before. I think it's something around, and I think that we shouldn't be scared of that stuff. We should figure out how to make it the right thing. And I would say, just to carry it further, I think the sort of impetus for it is going to get a lot louder, and it's going to start resonating a lot more with all the talk about race these days, because the people who are on the short end of the stick of that stuff are people in poor communities, and they tend to be other races. And we cannot be seen to be bastions of the status quo and keeping those people out of school, out of good schools. That's a losing battle in the long run. And so I think what the point the guy made was, I thought, right on point. We need to be ones leading that, taking that in the right direction, as opposed to allowing this stuff to happen by bits and pieces through, the legislative process with special interests trying to get mysterious things done, like shortening the time to sign up for the school board. But that's my bandwagon. The only other thing I'll say, in some of the presentation, I heard it more than once, kind of picking up on what I think one of you said about the differences in resources in different districts, as far as to get kids, get to them. And coupled with that, the amount of time and effort that teachers are putting into trying to pull that off. And I heard that in more than one presentation. And so I think that's going to be a theme of something. I mean, I assume that everybody is working hard and being diligent, but I think, maybe there is, in some places, way above and beyond, or at least that's what we're going to be hearing. So that's my 2 cents.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of summarize what we heard on Friday. Brian, have you heard back from David Gill to see if he is able to join us again?
No, he hasn't been able to get back in, and Sam was working on it as well. So, what I'd recommend it at this point, we have the progress report attached, and we actually have a scheduling meeting tomorrow with K&S Construction. So after the meeting, I'm going to touch base with Lindsay and Jamie, since they are our finance and facilities committee for the district, and then at that point, we can put together a communication on, both anything additional on this update and anything going on with the schedule to the entire board. And then I'll also work with Sam so he can put out an update to the community. Does that sound acceptable to the board?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, well, we will follow up on that tomorrow then. Anything else, Brian, for your superintendent's report?
No, that's everything.
Okay, we're going to move down into Board of Education section. So anything, Melissa, from special school districts?
Nope.
All right. And Keith just gave us our MSBA delegate report. Anything else to add?
No, you don't want to hear me again, I'm sure.
You did very well, so that's good. Okay, then upcoming events. Right now, we do have 2 meetings scheduled in July. And then Brian, do you want to just make those tentative or as needed? Because generally we don't have meetings in July. All right. And then we're still working on setting a date for a board retreat. So we'll just tentatively still think those for like 2nd and 3rd week of August, somewhere in there. Melissa, if you're available, and around, that would be great. And right now it sounds like people are fairly flexible. And then anything, so Kate, if folks are interested in attending the 2020 annual conference, MSBA conference in Kansas City in September, let Kate know. Anything else that you need from us, Kate?
No, not this evening.
Okay. All right, well, that ends our open session. So we can get a motion to adjourn to closed sessions for the reasons stated in the agenda.
I move that we adjourn and move into closed session for the reasons stated in the agenda.
Okay.
Second.
Right, great. We will need a roll call vote.
Jamie Allen,
Yes.
Melissa Narrett, Chris Perkins,
Yes.
Keith Reitenberg,
Yes.
Lindsay Spencer,
Yes.
Carrie Trostel, absent. Mark Walmer.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Hey.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Kate.